Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, welcome back to this online class, English Language Teaching Research Method class. And we are from 4th group. We will discuss about researching in writing. And first, I would like to introduce our group member. The first one is me, Deni Kurniawan as a moderator. And the second one is Ayunida. The third one is Zahrina, ulfa. And the last one is pheonix. And after this, we will show you the presentation slide or PowerPoint slide in this video. And after that, we will open you a discussion and answer section. So just pay attention to this video. And I would like to say thank you to Dr. Refnaldi, our beloved lecturer, for the chance given to this. And now we move on to the first presenter. First presenter is explain about our topic today.
Researching writing, there are three common approaches. The first is text-oriented research, the second one is writer-oriented research, and the last one is reader-oriented research. Let's discuss the first approach. The first approach is text-oriented research. This approach views writing as an outcome of activity, as words on a page or screen, and can be descriptive, analytical, or critical. Text can also be examined in a variety of ways, looking at particular features or their themes, cohesive elements, or move structure. We can examine a text in isolating or as a sample from a single genre, time period, or writer, and we can collect a number of texts together as a corpus and aggregate those features as representative of other texts. In text-oriented research approach, this approach sees text in two sides. The first side is sees text as object. The dominant model for many years saw writing as a textual product, a coherent arrangement of elements structured according to a system of rules. Based on ideas inherited from structuralism and implicit in the transformational grammar of Noam Chomsky, a basic premise of this approach is that texts are autonomous objects which can be analyzed and described independently of particular context, writer, or readers. Texts have a structure. They are orderly arrangement of words, clauses, and sentences, and by following grammatical rules, writers can encode a full semantic representation of their intended meaning. The other side sees text as a discourse. While an autonomous model views text as forms which can be analyzed independently of any real-life uses, another way of seeing writing as a material artifact looks beyond surface structure to see text as a discourse, or the way we use language to communicate to achieve purposes in particular situation. Here, the writer is seen as having certain goals and intention, and the ways we write are resources to accomplish this. So, instead of form being disembodied and independent of context, a discourse approach sees them as located in social action. Teachers following this line aim to identify the ways that text actually works as communication by linking language form to purpose and context. Discourse refers to language in action and to the purposes and function linguistic form serve in communication. Here, the linguistic patterns of text point to context beyond the page, implying a range of social constraints and choices which operate on writers in any situation. The writer has certain goals and intentions, certain relationship to his or her readers, and certain information to convey, and the form of a text are researches used to accomplish this. These factors draw the analyst into a wider perspective which look at its text in a world of communicative, purposive, and social action, identifying the ways that text actually work as communication. Okay, the next approach is writer-oriented research and teaching. This approach emphasizes the action of writers rather than the feature of text. Champions of this approach believe that writing constitutes a process, or at least a complex of activities from which all writing emerges, and that this is generalizable across contexts of writing. In this approach, there are three main contours of three positions which together have contributed to highly influential process writing movement. The first one is writing as personal expression. Originating with the work of Elbow in 1998 and Murray in 1985 and others, this view encourages writers to find their own voices to produce writing that is fresh and spontaneous. There is an underlying assumption that thinking precedes writing and that the free expression of ideas can be encouraged self-discovery and cognitive maturation. Writing development and personal development are seen as symbiotically interwoven to the extent that good therapy and composition aim at clear thinking, effective relating, and satisfying self-expression. The expressivist views strongly resist a narrow definition of writing based on notion of correct grammar and usage. Instead, it sees writing as a creative act of discovery in which the process is as important as the product to the writer. Writing is learned, not taught, and the teacher's role is to be non-directive and facilitating, providing writers with the space to make their own meaning through and encouraging positive and cooperative environments with minimal interference. Because writing is a developmental process, teachers are encouraged not to impose their views, give models, or suggest responsive to topic beforehand. The next point that can influence process writing movement is writing as cognitive process. Interest in writers' composing processes has been extended beyond notion of creativity and self-expression to focus on the cognitive aspect of writing. This is a very different view of process as it draws on the technique of and theories of cognitive psychology and not literary creativity. Essentially, It sees writing as a problem-solving activity. How writers approach a writing task as a problem and bring intellectual resources to solving it. This view of writing has developed a range of sophisticated investigative methods, generated an enormous body of research, and was until recently the dominant approach to teaching writing. And the last point and the last point that can influential process writing movement is writing as a situated act. A third writing-oriented perspective goes some way to addressing the criticism level at cognitive modeling by giving greater emphasis to the actual performance of writing. Less a single theory than several lines of inquiry, this research incorporates the writer's prior experience and the impact of the immediate local context on writing and has had an important influence on both the ways we see writing and how it might be studied. Writing is a social act that can occur within particular situation. It is therefore influenced both by the personal attitudes and prior experience that the writer brings to writing and the impact of the specific political and institutional context in which it takes place. By using detailed observation of acts of writing, participant interviews, analysis of surrounding practices, and other techniques, researchers have developed interesting account of local writing context. This description gives significant attention to the experience of writers and to their understanding of the demands of the immediate context.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Ayunida as the second speaker of Group 4. Will continue Citra's explanation. So, there are three approaches to writing that are text-oriented research, writer-oriented research, and reader-oriented research. Citra have explained text and writer-oriented research, and I will explain the third approach that is reader-oriented research. So, this approach emphasizes the role that reader play in writing, adding a social dimension to writing research by elaborating how writers engage with an audience in creating a text. Here, texts are not isolated examples of competence, but the concrete expression of social purposes intended for a particular audience. The writer is seen as having certain goals and intention, having certain relationship to their readers, and having certain information to convey to the readers. And therefore, they use text as resources to accomplish the goals and to convey certain information to the reader. The process of writing involves creating a text that we assume the reader will recognize and expect. The process of reading involves drawing on assumptions about what the writer is trying to do. And the next slide is an overview of methods. This part is about the most commonly used method in researching writing. Much writing research combines several methods, often both quantitative and qualitative, to gain a more complete picture of a complex reality. The concept of use triangulation or the use of multiple sources of data or approaches can bring greater plausibility to the interpretation of results. For example, the researcher may use data from questionnaire and then use data from the interview. And another feature of writing research is that it tends to favor data gathered in naturalistic rather than control condition. Naturalistic condition is like classroom observation, while control condition is like using questionnaire or interview to collect the data. However, this is not to say that methods that elicit data through questionnaire, structured interview, or experiments are not employed, or that they have nothing to tell us about writing. It is simply that there has been a strong preference for collecting data in authentic circumstances, not specifically set up for research, such as via classroom observation or analysis of naturally occurring text. And the next slide is the main methods for researching writing from Highland 2003. There are 7 main methods. That is, the first one is questionnaire, highly focused elicitation of respondents of self-report about action and attitudes. The second, interviews, adaptable and interactive elicitation of respondent self-reports. The third, verbal reports, retrospective accounts and think aloud reports of those while composing. And the four, written reports, diary or log accounts of personal writing or learning experiences. And the fifth is observation, direct or recorded data of lived interaction or writing behavior. And the sixth is text, study of authentic example of writing used for communication in a natural context. And the last is case study, a collection of techniques capturing the experiences of participants in a situation. We come to the first and the second method, elicitation, questionnaires, and interview. The first one is questionnaire. Questionnaire used for collecting a large amount of structure, often numerical, easily analyzable self-report data. Questionnaire also useful for exploratory studies into writing attitudes, behaviors. And also it used for identifying issues that can be followed up later by more in-depth methods such as interview. And interview offer more flexibility and greater potential for elaboration and detail. Participants are able to discuss their interpretation and perspective. They can share what writing means to them rather than responding to preconceived categories. Both of questionnaire and interview allow researchers to tap people's views and experience of writing, but interview tends to be more qualitative and heuristic, while questionnaire more quantitative and conclusive. And the next slide is I provide 2 articles that use questionnaire and interview to collect the data. The first article is entitled Students' Perception and Preferences of Written Feedback in Academic Writing from Tom Morney Joe in 2013. The purpose of the study is to investigate ESL third-year students' perception on the importance and effectiveness of written feedback in the year academic writing assignment. The researcher collect the data through questionnaire toward 34 diploma students. And the second one is two types of strategies used by Japanese scientists when writing research article in English by Okamura in 2005. This study tried to find out kinds of difficulties of non-English speaking professional research when writing research paper, and then find out learning and writing strategies do they employ to cope with these difficulties. The researcher used interview to collect the data toward 13 Japanese researchers of varying experience. Okay, that's all from me.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everybody, with me Zahrina Ulfa as the third speaker, and I will continue the explanation from my friends before. That's about introspection. First, we should know what is introspection. Introspection, examination of one's unconscious thoughts and feelings. So, introspection is the process of observing and reflecting on one's thought, feelings, motive, reasoning process, and mental states with a view to determining the ways in which these processes and states determine our behavior. In general, introspection is divided into two categories: verbal reports and written reports. Now we come to verbal reports. First, protocols. Protocols involve participants writing in their normal way but instructed to verbalize all thinking at the same time so that information can be collected on their decisions, their strategies, and their perceptions as they work. So, the use of verbal reports as data reflects the idea that the process of writing requires conscious attention, and then at least some of the thought process involved can be recovered either as a retrospective written or spoken recall, or simultaneously with writing as a think aloud protocol. The second is think aloud. Think aloud techniques have been extremely productive in revealing the strategies writers use when composing, particularly what students do when planning and revising text. When we ask the students to think aloud, it means that asking learners to verbalize their thought processes while they are involved in processing language, typically reading a text or writing an essay. And the last is retrospective. So, learners verbalize their thought processes immediately after they process the language. Now we come to written reports. There is a diary. So, diaries offer an alternative way of gaining introspective data. So, these are first-person accounts of a language-using experience documented through regular entries in a journal and then analyzed for recurring patterns or significant events. So, Diaries can be asked to produce narrative entries which freely introspect on their learning or writing experiences or set guidelines to restrict the issues addressed. This can be in the form of detailed points to note, write about what you found most, or a loose framework for response, or not all the work you did to complete this task. Next, we come to the observation. Like the explanation before, while elicitation and introspective methods provide reports of what people say they think and do, now observation methods offer actual evidence of it by systematic documentation of participants engaged in writing and learning to write. They are based on conscious noticing and precise recording of actions as a way of seeing these actions in a new light. And observation is often combined with other methods such as interview and others. Now, text data. We should note that a major source of data for writing research is writing itself, the use of text as an object of study. So, text can be approached in a variety of ways. Most research now seeks to discover how people use language in specific contexts. So, text data usually consists of documents which can represent words, sentences, or even paragraphs of free-flowing text. Something that we should highlight here, the main approaches to studying written text are currently genre and corpus analysis. Now we come to genre analysis. So, genre analysis emphasizes the psychological process of the text construction through the presentation and analysis of the regular organization together with other linguistic features of a text. Genre analysis offers a deeper explanation of relationship between the form and the functions. So, this is a widely recognized method. It raises questions about how far a single text can be representative of a genre. It raises questions about how far a single text can be representative of a genre. Genre analysis is an area of discourse analysis that studies written and spoken discourse. And the last is, there are some steps that suggest by Bhatia. So, Bhatia 1993 suggests some basic steps for conducting a genre analysis, which emphasize the importance of locating texts in their context. First is select a text which seems representative of the genre you want to study. The second is place the text in a situational context, that is, use your background knowledge and text clues to guess where the genre is used, by whom, and why it is written the way it is. And the third, compare the text, study the institutional context, select the focus, and the last is check your analysis with a specialist informant to confirm your findings and insights. Okay guys, let's move into the next section about corpus, and I will explain about corpus. And the first one that we have to know is, what is corpus? A corpus can be defined as a systematic collection of naturally occurring texts of both written and spoken language. And in the linguistic aspect, in the linguistic
study, corpus linguistic can be defined as the study of language or linguistic phenomena through the analysis of data obtained from corpus. And now we move on into the next slide. So that we have to know in this section that is place for corpus linguistic in applied linguistics. So where the place of corpus in the applied linguistic that we have we're talking about here. So the first one is a means to explore actual pattern of language use. So this means that we have to know and explore what pattern of the language used in the linguistic context, and a tool for developing materials for classroom language instruction. So this is really useful and a tool when we develop learning teaching language in the classroom, and to explore different questions about language use. So there are so many explanation about language use, especially in the corpus, that we can know there's so many and explore different questions about language use, and to provide powerful tools for analysis of natural language, and the last one to give an insight about language use varies in different situations. And now we move on into the corpus analysis. So corpus studies are therefore based on both qualitative and quantitative method using evidence of frequency and association. So what does it mean by frequency and association in here? As you can see in the slide. So frequency means is based on the idea that if a word, string, or grammatical pattern occurs regularly in a particular genre of subject or subset of language, then we can assume it is significant in how that genre is routinely constructed. And about association refers to the ways features associate with each other in collocation patterns. Okay, now we move on into qualitative and qualitative analysis. So the first one, quantitative techniques are essentially for corpus-based study. For example, if you wanted to compare the language use of pattern for the words big and large, that's for example, you would need to know how many times each word occurs in the corpus, how many different words occurs with each of these adjectives or the collocation, and how common each those collocation is. These are all quantitative measurement. And also corpus linguistic quantitative and qualitative, actually qualitative and quantitative methods in the corpus are extensively used in combination. So quali and quanti, they relate each other, they combine to get a better result. So begin with quantitative finding first and work toward qualitative ones. Now we move on into the method of corpus-based analysis. The first one that we have, there are 5 word lists. There are 5 methods of corpus-based analysis. The first one is word list, and the second one is concordances, collocations, and keywords. So what does it mean by this for aspect? So when we analyzing using corpus tools in the research method, so this is first step that we have to do. The first one is word list. What does it mean by word list? Word list that we have to word listening and accounting and tearing the text apart. And step number 1 is compiling concordance or putting words back into context. And the third step, sorting the context in a concordance, uncovering patterns. And the last step is examining the context of word, looking for collocations. So how to collect the data? We get the data in the corpus. The first one that we have to select corpus. Corpus is, as I mentioned before, some researchers said that this is really useful when we want to do a research. We use appropriate tools, and mostly corpus is used by a lot of research in the world. And the first one, when we want to use corpus, first we have to select corpus, of course, and when we collect the data. And the second one, investigate possibilities for comparative analysis in the corpus, and select aspect of variation, and select tools and statistical methods. And the last one, analyzing of lexical variation by sex, age, social class, and mode, speech, and writing. Okay, thank you. And after this, we will move on into the question and answer section. Thank you so much.